when you read the scriptures, there's not one person who didn't go through something. A lady that we had met asked us if we would adopt out of the blue. Out of my mouth came an enthusiastic yes. FASD is considerably more prevalent than any other condition out there, and yet the awareness is remarkably down in the basement. Nobody knows anything about it. Think of FASD on a spectrum of a person who's been drinking alcohol. And so a person who's been drinking, it might be as simple as their eyes are blurred.
Yeah. Or maybe a fit of rage or
Impulsive, not understanding what tomorrow's going to be. Chaos had reached 100%. Everything's overwhelming and I can't go anywhere. One thing that I learned was to put aside the anxiety and to start to focus on the promises of God.
So good. Yeah.
It's okay. I understand why that would be so emotional.
Stories stir the soul.
Stories reveal.
And stories heal.
In this podcast, we will give you an inside look at someone who's had a life-changing breakthrough.
Real people, real stories with real breakthroughs. As a health and wellness expert and coach, and Todd as a men's mentor,
we've seen firsthand what God can do when it comes to a breakthrough. So lean in, listen well. This could be your biggest breakthrough.
Hello there, and welcome to Your Biggest Breakthrough. I'm your host, Wendy Pett.
Hi, Wendy Pett. I'm Todd Isberner.
Hello.
Oh, it's so good to be back together again, doing another wonderful podcast on your biggest breakthrough.
It's always great.
Always breakthroughs to share, hopefully breakthroughs that you can relate to. And so I just have to ask, what happens, Wendy, when you're just starting out your faith journey and it involves a canoe in the wilderness, and then somehow gets sealed in a horror movie watching The Exorcist?
Well, I have a feeling we're going to find out.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that today's guest has anything but an ordinary path.
Yeah. Today's guest is Joel Sheagren, and he's an award-winning filmmaker, photographer, and storyteller whose greatest inspiration comes from home, raising two neurodiverse children impacted by FASD. You'll learn more about that, autism, ADHD, and trauma.
Yeah, no, his journey from agnosticism to faith really began in this canoe guide ride in the wilderness. And then it evolved into just decades-long calling to create things through his story and the story of what's happening in his family.
Yeah, God is so good. Joel is the founder of Sam in a Can Productions. Sam is actually the name of his son, and the visionary behind the Embraced movement. It's a media-driven initiative addressing the hidden link between parental alcohol exposure and issues like homelessness, trafficking, and fatherlessness. So through his books and his film and practical caregiver resources.
Which is awesome, by the way.
Yes, and we're going to make sure you have your hands on that.
Yeah.
Joel equips families, churches, and communities to better understand and support neurodiversity.
Yeah, awesome ministry that God is using him for. And today you're going to hear really just how this one man's long
and
road,
his wife.
Yes, absolutely. Together, their long road of perseverance, their prayer walks, dreams, and these unexpected God moments, and how all this has developed into a platform so that they can help families really bring about change.
Yeah, enjoy the show. Well, welcome, Joel Sheagren, to the Your Biggest Breakthrough podcast. It's a delight to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Joel, you're one of the most unusual guys we've ever encountered.
Now,
I'm just
why
going
would
to be
you
straight
say
up.
that? That's so just out there. I don't know that that's true.
No, because he's such a delightful soul. He's so easy and good to be around, and he always brings joy and peace and patience and calm, sort of the opposite of me.
And yet he's got an amazing
and yet
story,
your
right?
story is like, whew, hang on for the ride. So we're gonna start at the very beginning. I want to start with your salvation story, Joel. Because it's a wild one. I want you to tie this together, but you're guiding canoes in the boundary waters of Minnesota. You at the time were agnostic. Somehow in the whole process that led up to it, The Exorcist, the movie, kicked you over the finish line spiritually, so to speak. So you got to tell us what happened and how God used something so unexpected to open up your eyes.
Yeah. So when I was 14, my parents attended a Methodist church. And as a kiddo, teenager, you go to church with your parents, etc. And the question was asked, who is Christ? And, it's like, well, he's probably a historical figure, but there wasn't any personal relationship connected to that. And over time, I probably got up and left and went home after that. I don't think during the middle of the class, but after class, I just went home because I really wanted to think about that. But I really couldn't come to a conclusion on who he was at that time. And of course, your 14-year-old mind is not able to process all that anyway. Who can process the God of heaven?
Yeah.
And over the next several years, I just really contemplated that. I had an opportunity with the Scouts, who I guided with in the Boundary Waters, to also go to a World Jamboree in Japan. And of course, you're Buddhism, kind of exploring and thinking about it at that time. But when I was 16, I started guiding in the Boundary Waters. I grew up as a Scout, an Eagle Scout, and pursued the outdoors every time I could. And I had an opportunity to start to get training and become a guide in the Boundary Waters. And you sit under the stars with the Aurora Borealis and the wind. You'd be going down a lake heading north, and you'd have a tailwind, and then you'd go to the next lake that's heading north, and it'd be a headwind or vice versa. And it's just like, what? There's some sort of design to all of this. It's a mystery. You'd sit on the shoreline and you'd see a storm come through, and it never made it to your side of the lake, which was, a 20-minute paddle over there. And so it's like, there's a remarkable design to all of this. And by the time I was 18, and after a couple summers of just really being immersed in such remarkable beauty and design, I was asked to go to the movie The Exorcist. And I thought, well, okay. And so off to the movies we went with friends. And you're sort of out of touch with culture when you're in the summer. And I would leave high school the day after high school was done and come home the day before high school started. I was out of it for 3 months in terms of culture. And
Which
so I
isn't
really
such a bad
didn't
thing.
No, it really, and it takes a couple months to kind of get into the rhythm
reorient
of
yourself.
everybody. Yeah. And so in that context, I really didn't know what The Exorcist was, but it was an interesting bird. And I grew up in a funeral home that was housed in an old mansion.
Yeah, wait. Okay, let's just pause on that for just a minute, because
What's
I
that
don't know
like?
anyone else that was brought up in a funeral home. Like, I can't even imagine. Like,
Yeah, what kind of an effect did that have on you growing up?
well,
Oh, I don't know.
Right.
When you
he
grow up
escaped
in
for the
it, you're
summer. Let's
sort of,
just put it that way.
yeah, it's just sort of normal, right? You don't know any difference when,
Right.
Yeah.
uh, so I do remember when I was in second grade, my parents drove past the funeral home that was in this old mansion. And I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, is that ever a big home? Of course, you're in second grade and everything is big. But, and then 6 months later, my parents had driven by it because they were thinking about buying it. My dad was a funeral director. And 6 months or so later, we're moving into this house. And I had experiences with the demonic as a second grader.
Wow.
Yeah. So physical appearances of crap, if you will, in an oversized room. So there were, I don't know, lots and lots of rooms in an old mansion, and they were all big with 12-foot ceilings and all those kinds of stuff. And it was my own room with my own bathroom. And you just think that's kind of normal because that's what I grew up in, I guess.
That's kind of a
But
scary movie right there in and of itself. You growing up in a funeral home with
Yeah,
in
right,
a big scary mansion with
Right,
rooms and
well,
demonic
yeah,
experiences.
well, you would think so, but it was
Yeah.
just pretty normal. My parents were highly involved in the community and with their church family, etc. And so people came and went all the time. But at night, it was a little terrifying to go to sleep as a second grader because within the first week of being there, I had had the demonic show up in my room and try to frighten me. And of course, and I didn't share that with anybody. But I've had, because of that, it really opened up my imagination and my reality that there is another side to the spiritual dimension that we just don't pay attention to.
So back
So
to going to The Exorcist. Yes.
yeah, so I had gone to the movie The Exorcist, and I came home, and that was frightening.
Yeah.
And I'm standing in the kitchen, and I have a climb to the attic where my bedroom is. So 3 flights in this old mansion
Wow.
at 11 o'clock, midnight, whatever it was. And I gave my life to Christ.
And let's talk about that moment.
Yeah. What happened?
Because
How'd
what
that happen?
happened?
Yeah, so that experience of seeing the demonic as a kid and then the reality of what that might mean from a dark side, going to that movie. I did have a friend who had shared with me Christ, and I was just with him actually last week. We've been friends since 3rd grade, that had an influence in my life. And so I did have a context, even though between the Sunday school question and probably younger in those Sunday school settings, and then a friend who was pretty active with witnessing. He wasn't like an evangelist. He was just a concerned friend that happened to know Christ and was very tolerant of my wildness.
That's the best kind of evangelist, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't you
Yeah.
think?
So, so I had a context for what it meant to give your life to Christ. And here I am, 18. I'm ready to go to photography school and be on my own. And of course, that's exciting as an 18-year-old that doesn't have Christ, because you think of all the craziness that you're going to do and sowing seeds, as they say, or whatever the terminology might be. So the process of thinking through my trip to Japan and my friend's conversation and a lot of in the woods walking and thinking about God and his existence all kind of converged on me as I was walking up those flights of steps to the bedroom.
And after coming home, seeing that movie, it was
After
like it all
seeing
kind
the
of came
yeah.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I knew
this
what
is
I
real.
was. Yes, very much so, because I knew that meant that I wasn't going to go to college and be wild.
Mm.
I think it's fascinating, Joel, just how this process you went through as a boy, growing up in a funeral home, then life seemingly like this is sort of normal life, corpses and demonic and all of that, and then you kind of shift over to in those vulnerable teen years, being agnostic and kind of questioning everything. But then you're in the woods, and God just really proves to you that there is something way beyond your ability to grasp when you looked up into the stars and you felt the wind on your back and all of that, just showing you
Yeah.
his revelation of
Lavish
who he
his
is in
love.
nature. It seems like a beautiful story of God just continuing to pull you closer and closer. And even the act of going up the stairs after seeing that scary music is sort of like an ascent from on your way from where you were on your way to heaven, going up the
That's
stairs,
good. That's
into the
good.
presence of God.
Yeah.
I think it's just such evidence of God's reaching out to you and bringing you closer and closer to himself.
Yeah. And so we know this because we've talked to you before this interview, but we know that your breakthrough didn't come quickly. First, you shared how just over the years it's kind of progressed. And so let's kind of talk about the process of your, I guess,
Journey.
Yeah, your journey, your walking up those stairs kind of thing in your life through prayer and through dreams and perseverance. Let's kind of talk about that process and what it was like in those in-between years for you.
Well, I had soon after that experience of coming to Christ, in the ascent.
Yeah. It's good that you saw that.
I went off to photography school. It was something I had wanted to do since 8th grade. Photography was a big part of my growing up life and experience, and just capturing imagery and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to pursue a career in photography, and I got around campus folks. I went to a 2-year college, which was in Waterloo, Iowa, and I was living in uh, a different town that had a university at it. And so I had gone to a university campus, and I didn't know where to start, but I wanted to find some people who were people of faith. And I want to say I got caught up in fundamentalism. And as I was trying to sort out where to go and what to do next, because I was at photography school, but I was in love with Jesus.
Mm.
And did I need to go to the mission field? And so I'd go on a prayer walk, and I was asking God if I should throw my cameras over the bridge when I got back and go to the mission field. And it may have been audible. It might as well have been audible. No, this is your platform for influence. And that's still with me. I still get goosebumps when I say that. And I shared that with the group of people who were dispensationalists at the time, or cessationists, which they believe that the gifts aren't still around. And they said, no, God doesn't speak like that. You need to go to Bible school and be a youth pastor. And when I look back at all that, it's like, well, how did you hear? Anyway,
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, but I didn't have the sense at that time. I was knew it. Everything was changing. But I ended up going to Bible school and picked up and went out to Pennsylvania, and I was going to pursue a youth pastorate. And there were just a lot of things that were just strange, that just seemed sort of like rules and regulations. And when I read the scripture, it was about relationship and about hearing from the Lord and moving in your immediate prophecy of, somebody would take off Paul's belt and say, don't go here, you'll be bound, that sort of immediacy about prophecy. And it probably took 20 years before I started to unravel from that environment. And it came through a process of dreams. God was giving me these monster, colorful, prolific, motion picture dreams that like you could reach out and touch them. And
Cool.
I was starting to process those in relationship to specific things that were coming up. And they overwhelmed me. And I said, well, Lord, can you give me some smaller dreams that I can kind of step into? And he did. 3 little dreams. He was so gracious. And one was that I would open up back in the day of film, before our digital world, I would open up the back of the camera in the dream and reshut it because the film had not rewound and everything was okay. And I was back home. I was not living in Burlington, but Burlington had different events and family events, and I was back, and they had an event where there was a bicycle race up. Everyone's heard of the San Francisco, now why is the name included me, where the crooked street.
Yeah.
I can't remember it either, but
I know which one you're
Anyway,
talking about.
Burlington has one as well. It's a block long rather than 2 blocks long, and it's called Snake Out. And so we would, there was a bicycle criteria. And so I was taking pictures of just kind of the motion and the bicycle pedals and people competing, et cetera, et cetera. And I rewound and I heard the little click that the film had come back in. I opened the camera and it hadn't. And I reshut it. And I went ahead and developed it. And guess what? I didn't lose any imagery. And in that, which doesn't happen. You open the back of a camera, expose your film to light, you're done. It's over with. But anyway, that was one of 3 little dreams. I call them little compared to the others.
Yeah. But it's nice how, not nice. That's a weird word to say. It's nice. It's nice how God speaks to us through dreams, right? But we need to pay attention and really process those dreams, right? And to be present and aware that, oh, wow, this is the moment that he was sharing this with me, so that I wouldn't be full of worry or angst that I exposed all this film or whatever. He was already giving you a precursor of that everything would be fine. And so I think how often he speaks to us and maybe we're just not listening. But there are so many people, Joel, that are they're just in the middle of their long wait of what they've always dreamed to do, and they're just, I don't know, they're just maybe frustrated. What would you say to that person that is trying to stay faithful and they just really haven't seen the fruit yet? Because you've been on that journey yourself with your career, and we'll go into it with your son here in a moment. But what would you say about if someone's just saying, I don't know. I don't
Like
know
I'm
what
in the
God
middle of
has for
this
me.
and
I'm
I
in the
don't know,
middle of
like,
it. He's
where am I
giving me
going and when's it going to end?
little
And
dreams, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if I were Kurt, read the Bible.
There you go. There you go.
Oh man.
Well, you
Love
don't
that.
even have to
Yeah.
be Charlie Kirk to say read the Bible. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
short answer.
Well,
Good.
yeah. So and I don't mean that to be flippant
Right.
but when you read the scriptures, there's not one person who didn't go through something.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle right now reading Genesis, and so the story of Joseph is forefront. 17 years, right?
Yeah.
Or thereabouts, without any understanding, and with remarkable anxiety of being thrown into a pit and not knowing what was going on. I don't know that that's any different for any of us, because there were plenty of times that you go through things, and it's like, how many layers, God? How many layers are there? How much longer is it? We're not patient by nature. We
It's
want
true.
things, particularly in this culture, to come at a faster speed than what maybe God's timing is. And on the backside of it, it the process was very anxious up front, so much so that I had a red blotch on the front of my forehead as it related to when a business things were happening, and I would go to the woods and I could feel the heat on the front of my head, and I'd come home and I had a red blotch on one of those transitions, not knowing what was going on. And over time, that just slowly, that tightness, that tension,
Stress.
that those feelings of anxiousness just start to unwind, because you realize that God's at work. and that-
Surrender, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Over and
Over and
over.
over.
Yeah.
That's right.
Maybe every 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Well, I think it's it's evidence of your faith when you remain faithful and you can't see kind of the forest from the trees. You're just in the middle of it, and throughout your 20 years or so that you're going through this whole process of being matured in Christ. And dealing with anxiety. And here you're a filmmaker, producer, a writer, but all the while you're dealing with things at home. And this is where we want to move into that sort of could compound the problems or the issues or the challenges. So I want you to talk a little bit about what was going on at home during this time in your marriage and with your son.
Yeah. So one of the, so about 20-ish years ago, the business had fallen out. I'll start there. And it went from being remarkably busy. I traveled the world. I used my cameras to make a living, and I made a good living. And the bottom fell out for what seemed like no reason. And part of the answer that I'll finish on your earlier question, and I'll tie that in, is find accountability too.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Lord was starting to show many dreams and starting to speak to me on prayer walks. And my wife was very, very supportive. And she had said, I know God is talking to you. Make sure you don't go off the cliff on your own. And so I found
She's a
path.
good woman.
Yeah. And so one of those accountability folks was a close pastor at the time, and we would go on prayer walks anyway. And so I was sharing with him everything that was going on. I was getting dreams and getting insights on new direction from an advertising photographer to more filmmaking. I had gone on a prayer walk at one point, and I had said, Lord, what's up with the films, and where should I go with that? And it was one of those moments again that it might as well been audible. If it wasn't, it was just, he wanted me to tell his stories of hope and rescue, justice and mercy, and faith and miracles. And so I was like, I got goosebumps even now every time I say that, because those are pretty good themes, Laurie.
Yes.
But it was on the tail end of having or in the transition, I should say, of leaving an advertising and the prolificness of being busy and traveling and earning income to nothing, to getting a direction. So it was a confirmation that filmmaking was in front of me, because that was the earlier, when I was 18, that was part of it, right? And so here I am again with asking the Lord about that. And one of those dreams I had was that my wife and I would be handed a blanket, and in the blanket was a little boy, and he had life, and we took care of him, and we got him around friends and family. And in the dream, a little girl joined him, and then there was a Shakespeare uh, situation or environment that they were at. They were dancing around a pole with flags and music and costume, and it's called the Maypole Dance. And was part of the Shakespeare festival. And then at the end of the dream, the two kids went outside and started to exponentially grow. And at the time, I thought narcissistically, that's two parts to the business. And I wrote them down and went about my business. And then months later, my wife and I were at a conference. And this is prior to the business dropping out. And I'm trying to think, there's a few other dreams that took place, but I'll just stick to that. And we were at a conference, and it wasn't on adoption. We weren't thinking about adoption. And a lady that we had met asked us if we would adopt out of the blue. And out of my mouth came an enthusiastic yes. And as I was saying yes, I remembered the dream. My wife and I had been married a few years, plenty of passion, no medical reasons, but no kids. And so it was an unusual question at a conference that wasn't related to adoption. We said yes, and we brought our son home from the hospital. And all of these themes will tie in here as we go in our conversation, as people think that we're lost for a minute. But it was the transition from an advertising career of producing ad campaigns to more filmmaking and justice issues. And our family's been involved in that process through the adoption and understanding some of those things. So to finish the story, it caught us off guard. We said yes. And the little boy, who's now 20, almost 23, was going to be born in just 2.5 months. And so we set in motion the things that needed to happen for him.
Rapid motion.
Yeah. So for those that have never adopted, adoption can be years, and this was going to be happening in 2.5 months. And there's legal processes that need to fall into place, and it all
God was
happened.
definitely in this detail. Yeah.
And so in 2.5 months, all the legal pieces were in place before he was handed to us from the hospital. And we knew that the birth mother, so we were walking into the hospital, and the home study person, one of the legal processes, called us all excited about everything's in place. I can't believe it. And we're like, well, that's cool. She goes, no, you have no idea. 6 months is fast track. 2.5 months is unheard of.
Wow.
And we were elated and just kind of took it in stride at the same time. And we brought our son home from the hospital, and the birth mother shared with us in a medical report that she had drank alcohol during pregnancy. And that went right over our heads of what that might mean. And then in the dream, there was a little girl that joined the little boy, and the two of them were involved in the Shakespeare and going outside the building. And 2 years later, the birth mother called and said, would you take another?
Wow.
And we said, well, yeah, because we're in an open relationship. We'll take the little girl.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if we even knew in that conversation that it was a girl, but I remember thinking at least, yeah, we'll take the girl.
Yeah.
Sure enough, it's a little girl. And she's now married and doing well.
Wonderful.
So we had these two beautiful children in our home, set up through adoption in a really unique way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
God opened the door for that.
Yeah, big
but,
time.
But your son has struggled with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, correct? That's what we saw. Yep. And so you and your wife have really made it a mission to help others become aware of this and other things that you've discovered with your son. And so let's talk a little bit about how soon you recognized FASD and the signs that you noticed and kind of how you guys went about that journey.
Yeah, so there was a lot of chaos in the home, and there were milestones, developmental milestones that were missing along the way. And my wife was pretty privy to some of those. And she had considered getting a diagnosis, but put that aside because of stigma, not knowing what a diagnosis would help with, and those kinds of things. And so we pursued a lot of getting other psychological neural evaluations done where you're legal or officially go through the process of getting a diagnosis that might be ADHD or trauma. And so we went through an awful lot of those and an awful lot of after school programs and therapies, and none of them really seemed to work. Trauma got us in the neighborhood. And FASD is considerably more prevalent than any other condition out there, and yet the awareness is remarkably down in the basement. Nobody knows anything about it. And that was the case for us. I didn't even know what the acronym was at the time he was diagnosed. And finally at 14, my wife, out of desperation, because the chaos had reached 100%.
And when you say
24.
chaos, just real quick, can you just give us a snippet quickly what that chaos looked like in your home, how maybe your son was acting out, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so think of FASD on a spectrum of a person who's been drinking alcohol, whether it's a little or a lot, and the amount and all of that. So the height, the depth of the spectrum of a person, take away the intoxication, but leave the impact of the alcohol at birth with a child for life. That's what FASD is. And so a person who's been drinking, it might be as simple as their eyes are blurry.
Yeah. Or maybe a fit of rage or
Impulsive, not
impulsive.
understanding what
Right.
tomorrow's going to be.
Mhm.
But a big one is actually processing speed that we interpret as defiance.
Mm,
Wow.
And
because it's slower.
so I'll give you an example. It would be, his name is Sam, and I have permission to use his name. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
um, I need you to do the dishes. And you get the pushback. And traditional parent is you move towards, because you're not going to be disrespectful. Get with the program. 3 days later, he might calm down
Mm,
Yeah.
because you've moved towards him and he feels threatened and he has no idea why you're moving towards him in the tone that you're doing. So the adjustment, now the chaos for the listeners is 1% after 8 years. So everything takes time, right? It takes time to go through the process. God wants to get you to where you start to understand the purposes and designs that he has for you. And sometimes to undo that traditional parenting, it takes time too. And so I started learning about, well, hey, Sam, in 5 minutes, can you do the dishes? Because of the processing speed. He's not defiant.
right.
He needed time to shift from the activity he was doing. You still might get the pushback,
Mm.
but I was encouraged, let that go just walk the other way. Counterintuitive, traditional parenting. And guess what he was doing in 5 minutes?
The dishes.
There you go. Or whatever that chore might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
You know, Joel, there are parents who deal with a whole variety of what they would think are behavioral issues in the home. And sometimes they're tied to things like this or autism or ADHD or other conditions. And you can't approach those things from a traditional parenting standpoint. So it becomes, I think, somewhat overwhelming for some parents to know, what do I do about the chaos and the meltdowns and all this crazy stuff? Because my
Be very
parenting is not
discerning.
working.
Yeah.
Can you advise them on, like, what's the first step they take if they feel like this is beyond normal, and I'm not equipped to deal with this? Because you've written books, you're putting all things together, all kinds of resources together to help parents. But what would you say would be the starting point for that parent who feels confused,
At a loss.
overwhelmed, frustrated, like, I don't know where to go next. I don't know what to do next.
Well, for me, it was getting educated.
Yeah.
I wanted to parent my son different. I knew that God had gifted us with a child that didn't come in a pretty bow, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And oftentimes, if not always, our challenges are our anointing, right? And just to be really patient with our son while I was relearning how to parent different. And so be patient with yourself. Make sure as a parent that you get the sleep you need, because you make better choices. You can be more patient, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
When you have sleep and the worry, it says, cast your burdens on the Lord. That's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think too, what you'd said is really key. The starting point is, like, if you don't have the answers, it's like the answers are there, but you're going to need to spend the time and make the effort to get after the resources. And that's what you guys did, because this didn't just come all by itself. All of a sudden, Joel is the superstar parent because he understands how to deal with these kinds of things. And certainly you were relying upon the Holy Spirit and wisdom and guidance. But I think it's important for parents to know that there are answers and there are resources. And we want to talk a little bit about some of the resources you're beginning to provide. Like, for example,
Yeah. You're doing the embrace movement, which is huge. And,
right.
we have a society of fatherlessness. And so I just want to commend you immediately, Joel. And you'd be like, well, yeah, of course, it's my son. But a lot of fathers would run for the hills. You know what I mean? And I just want to say, way to go, having courage and being bold and being so loving and having mercy and just being a partner with your wife in this journey and with the Lord. And so anyway, a lot of men would run, right? So I just want to address that immediately and talk about your passion about, really with this embrace movement and justice issues, how you are going about sharing information, education, and empowerment to other families that might be dealing with something similar.
Well, thank you. It is overwhelming and humbling. Just this little hick from Iowa that's been asked to do a pretty big task. So as a filmmaker, I was overwhelmed that what is the acronym of FASD?
Yeah.
Why don't my wife and I, who are both educated, know anything about this? So I started, and in the world of FASD, it's been remarkably narrow for the resources are not there, I guess would be the easier way to say that. So it took a lot of effort. But I was also looking at creating a documentary that would help with the awareness. I looked at, well, my tool is telling story, right? And so I've been gifted in that area. So I started getting busy in casting vision for that. And as I was starting to collect interviews, it was one way in which I was able to gather information about how to parent, because I would ask the question to the researcher, to the other parents who were ahead of us in the journey of what works and those types of things. And so it is a passion project. And as we were starting to collect interviews from various people, I was starting to realize, well, we went through it took us, we went through 9 schools. It took us
Mm.
quite a bit of effort to get our son graduated from high school.
Wow.
And not a single professional on the educational side, the therapy side, the after school programs knew anything about FASD. A few
Wow.
knew what the term was,
Yeah.
but nobody knew the differences and the nuances between, because the overlapping symptoms between FASD, autism, trauma, ADHD, and FASD, they overlap in symptomology. And so you would dig into those areas and try to, but not everything worked. And we were fortunate that we had a therapist who was one of the folks that I interviewed, who happened to be one of the world's leading researchers in this area.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
And he's
Divine
right
appointment.
here in the Twin Cities, and he's a man of faith. And I think he has 7 or 8.
Credentials.
What's the
Degrees?
behind his name?
Yeah.
So we're fortunate in that regard. And he started teaching me because he would call, we did it on phone, and he would call once a week to talk to my son and walk him through different things. And I would get instructions from him on what is called metacognition. And it's basically how to help him think about his thoughts.
That's good.
And our kiddos, in the way that God has designed us, is called neuroplasticity, right? And so if you think about your thoughts, it starts to build new pathways
Sure.
on where you go. So in the context, everything's overwhelming and I can't go anywhere. Is that really what God says? So you have to rethink about those promises and the hope that God has for us, right? And so we have to do it. The scriptures are very, very specific about renew your thoughts, take every thought captive. And how we help our kids do that is think about their thoughts in the context of metacognition.
Yeah. And
And
being
so I
intentional
started,
about that.
yeah. And so you have to be in every day. God, I thank you that I'm seated in the heavenly realms.
Yes.
I thank you that you thought about me before the world was ever created.
Yeah.
That reframes my thinking to not be discouraged or
Yeah.
to mitigate the anxiousness
Yeah.
about
The power of our
those.
words, and
Yeah.
also focusing on gratitude and
Don't
who
you
we really
love
are in Christ.
and don't
Yeah.
you love the way that God can use some of our biggest challenges and our biggest obstacles to not just uh, benefit others, but to benefit ourselves? Like, you're doing the research and you're digging in, you and your wife, to understand more about these conditions that children are suffering through, and then parents trying to help them. And in the process, you're learning things, while helping to train your son or retrain him.
And I think,
You're also retraining yourself, which
yeah.
I think is just like the double whammy benefit, if we'll see it from God's point of view.
And I think about too how God knew he could trust you with this
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And because this is the gift and the call that he's put on your life, and this needs to be out there. And so nothing is wasted, and there's a plan greater than we can even imagine.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I'm sure at times it blows you away. It's a big, big work, and yet God's a big, big God. But I'm thinking about you and your wife you're continuing this process. You're learning, you're teaching, you're training, but now you're developing documentary. You're a feature film. You're putting together a caregiver guide. I mean, these are not small tasks, and I know that you know that better than anybody. But somehow, in your faith and God's provision, you're moving forward. And I think with everything that's going on, I guess at this point in time, and I realize you're still in the process, but what would you say has been the biggest breakthrough for you personally as you've gone and as you're going through and as you will go through this continued process?
Well, I think on a spiritual level, just reframing how I process the day and the importance
Yeah.
of that, making those declarations, so that my breakthrough is with my own spirit, with my own relationship with Christ, because it's a relationship. One thing that I learned was to put aside the anxiety and to start to focus on the promises of God.
So good. Yeah.
It's okay. I understand why that would be so emotional, and feeling your emotion.
Because it's too easy to think, woe is me, and where's the circumstances, and I don't get it, what's going on. And by the grace of God, I was able to come out of that process and start to focus on the promises and make those declarations every day. So
So
I had
powerful.
mentioned it earlier, but I'll say to myself and out loud multiple times a day, even to this day. I was on a prayer walk. God, thank you that I am seated in the heavenly realms with Christ. Thank you that you look upon me as though you're looking on your son. What a beautiful thing. Thank you, God. And just go through that whole list in Ephesians. It's basically every day I declare the book of Ephesians over myself because I
That's so
have it
good.
memorized. And
That's
so
so
I'm
good.
on that process of,
Yeah.
wow, it goes beyond my imagination. Thank you,
So
God.
true.
Mm,
So good,
that's
Joel.
beautiful.
For
Wow.
someone listening right now who's trying to turn their pain into purpose, like really what you're doing, what's one direction or mindset shift that you would tell them to start with? I know you just gave us the example of Ephesians and prayer walks, but is there anything in addition that they could do right now to help them on that mindset shift?
Well, it's understanding that God is much bigger than our circumstances is part of that mind shift.
Yeah.
And to really get your head around that, so that when I go through the book of Genesis that I'm in right now, over and over and over, Adam and Eve, did you trust God? Abraham, did you trust God? Joseph, did you trust God? And the list goes on and on. And you see the transformation of even Judah, who was an absolute jerk, make the transformation, take my life in place of Benjamin. And that's the heritage, right? But in the midst of all of that, none of them had an idea what was going on. That's why they're the pioneers, right? And to be able to trust God that he has a plan and that before time, he had us in mind
Good.
with a very specific purpose. And so
that's good.
trust. Yeah.
I
That's
love
so
that.
good.
That's it. Trust. And, stories help us along our own journeys, and you are a storyteller. And so I just thank you for heeding to the call of this project and this passion and the purpose that God has on your life right now through you and your wife going through this journey with your son and all that you've been through. Again, nothing's wasted. And so I know others are going to hear from your story and be encouraged for their own and find hope. And so speaking of finding hope, you have a caregiver guide called Embracing Hope that you are offering to people. Can you tell us where to find that?
Yeah, you can find it both on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. And both places also offer up the Audible. We don't, or the digital version. We don't have the Audible yet.
But we will put that in the show notes as well, so people will have it. So
yeah. So the project started with the documentary, and it feels like I left LA and headed to New York to make a documentary. And I made a left-hand turn and went to San Francisco and wrote a book called Embracing Hope, which is, it's a comprehensive care guide for some of the things that we've learned that have taken the chaos from 100% to 1%. And we've put that into a book. It's with a fellow believer and friend that's out of North Dakota. And I called him up and said, hey, I'm thinking about these interviews and turning them into CEUs as part of the Embraced project, the Embrace Movement project. Would you be interested? And he said, well, yeah, very much so. But would you help me develop a deck for social workers right now? I'm teaching social workers about this issue here in the state of North Dakota. And I said, well, yeah, I'd be glad to. And we ended up with like 70 pages of college level research. And
wow.
we started talking about, well, maybe this needs to be a book. And I said, well, let's go parent since we're two dads.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it came about. And so we shifted gears once he was done with those weekly or monthly, I forget which it was, lunch talks to the social workers.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
started
Joel, I'm sorry.
working on the book, and it developed into a comprehensive guide.
That's awesome.
So glad
just
about that.
cannot thank you enough and your wife for just
Yeah.
the perseverance and the faithfulness and the willingness to be used of God to take your story, your circumstances, your experiences, and not just bring hope and light and healing to your family, but to now hundreds of thousands of others who are waiting patiently for some additional insight and help. So we just pray God's blessing on you. We pray He
Yes.
just pours out the provision and the abundance, because this is such an important work. And God is going to bring glory to Himself in the process. And thank you for being a willing servant.
Yes. And thank you for being a guest on our podcast. This has been so
Oh,
delightful.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Thank you for
quite
sharing.
welcome, and appreciate the compliments, because it is a bit surreal. And the book
Yeah.
has only been out for a very short period of time. It was released late summers.
Wow.
Well,
It's just
again,
the
we
beginning.
will put that in the show notes, and people can grab that. So if you are watching this, listening to this, go to the show notes. And if it's not for you, maybe it's someone for that you know that is dealing with someone with FASD, or maybe just on the spectrum of some level, and it can really help them along. So anyway, thank you, Joel. God bless you, and I'm sure we will see you again soon. Take
My
care.
friend.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, we love spending time with you right here on Your Biggest Breakthrough podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. But until then, just head on over to yourbiggestbreakthrough.com, where you'll find some free resources and information, and a place where you can comment, and we would love to dialogue with you there. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.